Hello, and thank you for taking the time to view this presentation. In this video, I'm going to discuss the challenges and opportunities in the global virtual classroom. I am thrilled to be a part of the Educational Technology and Leadership Association, ETLA, annual virtual conference. I hope you find the expansion of global learning as exciting as I do. Before we dive into the research findings on the global virtual classroom, I'd like to give a brief introduction to myself and my background, which helped grow my interest in this subject. My name is Caitlin Crane, and I'm a project coordinator for state assessments at the American Institutes for Research in Washington, D.C. I'm also a master's student in George Washington University's Educational Technology Leadership Program. Nearly a year ago, I had an opportunity in my personal life to move abroad from Washington, D.C. to Amsterdam. I packed up my home and my job and my schooling and took them all with me to Europe. With the proliferation of Wi-Fi worldwide and the ability to complete a full master's program online with no in-person class time, I have had the opportunity to collaborate with classmates and complete projects from Italy, Spain, France, Germany, Ireland, England, and more. It's been an incredible year to explore different cultures while still maintaining ties to the progress I was making back in DC. The move is not without its challenges, however. The biggest one is the time shift. I am most of the time 6 hours removed from the East Coast, where my office and where GW are, 7 hours removed from my family in Chicago, and a full 8 hours from my work clients in New Mexico. Planning assignments and deadlines around this time shift does have some advantages. I can complete work early in the morning and have early access to lecture materials. And there are some disadvantages. Deadlines at 11:59 p.m. Eastern Time or at 5:59 a.m. Amsterdam time. Collaborating with classmates has not been without its trials as well, having to insist on slightly earlier phone calls or committing to remaining awake late. While wireless internet has become nearly standard at Airbnbs and hotels, there have been times where connectivity is not a given. Planning ahead to save materials to review and work on offline, and planning multiple avenues of communication if Skype isn't working in the hotel, visiting a cafe, or using my international cell phone. This also runs into cultural priorities. I want to be respectful of the places I visit while also being able to communicate that I need to complete my work and have internet. This can sometimes lead to awkward exchanges, particularly if there's also a language barrier. Now that I've introduced you to my personal experience, I want to widen the perspective with research on the challenges and opportunities afforded by truly international exchanges. I am an English-speaking student working with my American university. There is a growing desire for cross-cultural and cross-country, cross-language e-learning experiences, and a growing amount of research about successful and unsuccessful experiments with these new opportunities. Higher education in general, not just online, is growing all over the world. Between 2000 and 2010, there was a 53% increase in higher education students to 153 million, and the total number of higher education students is expected to skyrocket to 262 million by 2025. There has also been a huge increase in distance learning as internet access has grown. Between 1998 and 2008, distance learning grew by 150%, and in 2013, nearly 20% of undergrad students received most of their education through online courses. Finally, there is also growth in international education exchanges. There were nearly 975,000 international students enrolled in United States colleges in the 2014-2015 academic year, and American students studying abroad reached a record high of over 300,000. The globalization and digitization of education inherently brings up issues of culture. Germaine Rutherford and Kerr, in their article called An Inclusive Approach to Online Environments, attempt to define culture, and included this great quote from Michael Agar. Culture isn't something a group of people have, it's something you make up to fill in the spaces between them and you. Culture is something you create, a coherent connection of differences. Rather than culture being a noun, it's a verb. Culture is negotiated and built as participants seek to bridge their differences and face challenges together. Jermaine Rutherford and Kerr continue to outline in that article the concerns of culture that come up in planning for global classrooms. A learning environment in itself is a culture, built on the relationships between teacher and students and between students themselves, where styles of communication are brokered and negotiated depending on the teaching style and learning goals for the course. Social culture has its own challenges. Different countries have different cultural values and different languages. They also may have different technological priorities, a very wired culture or one with less focus on the internet. Finally, these different values are also evident in their different educational systems and policies. For example, Asian schools typically have high context learning environments with very formal student-teacher relationships, less focus on personal skills, and emphasis on students as recipients and reproducers of materials. American schools are more low context, with an emphasis on personal exploration and development, and a teacher role as a guide with a wider range of assessment tools. All these notions of culture feed back and forth into each other, making preparation more challenging for teachers and institutions looking to incorporate more diversity in their distance programs. How do these differences in culture manifest themselves, and how can we bridge these differences? After completing the goldmine of information on cultures from CARE, I looked to real-life case studies of international distance education to find challenges and solutions to these issues. There's often a clash of values. A global work team, for example, clashed between polychromic and monochromic cultures. Polychromic cultures, like Southern European countries, see time more fluidly. They're late to meetings and have more informal sessions. And monochromic cultures, commonly found in Northern Europe, compartmentalize their day and greatly respect meeting times. The gap between cultures widens particularly when students are separated by language and time zone barriers. In global teams, subgroups developed by culture. For example, Chinese and British students in a course formed Global Virtual Teams, or GVTs. However, they created subgroups by geography, dividing up tasks by students in each country. Researchers found these groups were less collaborative and engaged than those with international collaboration. Finally, administrative supports for global virtual classrooms were unequal for distance students versus face-to-face students. Information regarding registration, student health issues, and more was not provided as well to students abroad. For each of these global virtual classroom challenges, creative educators and researchers have discovered ways to overcome differences and, as Agar said, create a coherent connection of differences. I will summarize them here and then move on to discuss each with real-life examples. First, and most importantly, provide multiple modes of communication, allowing students to choose what ways they feel most comfortable and what ways they feel are most effective. Secondly, create social spaces that mimic real life as closely as possible and provide interesting opportunities for conversation. Third, monitor groups to prevent geographic division into subgroups. And finally, plan for virtual support for virtual students. First, and most importantly, provide different avenues of communications for students. Providing multiple modes of communication has been shown to mitigate the negative impact of cultural differences between group members. Email can help bridge time and distance, and the written word gives the user more time to form their thoughts that can be difficult when speaking. Teleconferencing can be more difficult as the issues of oral communication, different accents, and lack of vocabulary become more clear. A corporate global virtual team offset the possibility of miscommunication by including synchronous written notes. An electronic workspace for team members provided a sense of camaraderie while also being a space where documents could be shared and archived for reference. Finally, instant messaging in a chat room was most effective for informal chatting and bridging the gap in distance as team members could talk at the same time, synchronously. Next, mimic real-life social spaces to encourage communication. In one research study, a university in Hong Kong and a university in Texas partnered up to respectively learn and teach English as a second language in a full, immersive virtual environment. Using a private Second Life island just for these universities, they created the Caddy Shack, a diner where Chinese language learners could chat and interact with each other and with American language teachers. In the diner, users could also watch and share videos and other media to stimulate conversation. They could both chat with text or using their voices. Elsewhere on the island were other things for students to discover: campfires, a jet ski, dolphins, and more. The novelty of the social space and multiple areas and items for conversation were enjoyed greatly by the students. The unique environment motivated student engagement. Next, as a teacher or administrator, try to avoid groups subdividing themselves by region or culture. The logistical hurdles for global classrooms can often be overwhelming. Dealing with huge time differences and language barriers can make splitting into geographic subdivisions seem like a more workable solution for students. In a study of global virtual teams of British and Chinese students, some teams divided themselves geographically in order to complete their work. While teams with subgroups completed the work more or less as well as teams who worked together, the objective of the project was to collaborate and problem solve. Dividing into more convenient geographical subgroups may hinder team effectiveness and team collaboration. On the other hand, staying together and resisting the urge to stay with the familiar leads to great student engagement, motivation, and critical thinking. An exchange between American and Irish agriculture students, where they posted articles and discussed them, had control groups with geographically similar students and groups with international collaboration. All of these groups responded favorably to the social discussion aspect, but those with international collaboration found increased engagement, critical thinking skills, and written communication skills. These students even reported learning more from each other than the control groups. As a team leader or teacher, you should oversee and assign groups with cultural diversity to best take advantage of a global classroom. However, you also are responsible for monitoring for communication frequency and issues of culture clash. Finally, providing virtual supports to the global classroom is just as important as supports provided to brick and mortar classrooms. Providing help documents and activities is essential to global virtual classroom success. For example, NASA's Digital Learning Network provides not only pre-recorded and live video interactions for classrooms, they also include printable activities and learning aids to support teachers if there are any technical issues, or for them to translate to make easier to use for young students with limited bilingual skills. When planning a virtual exchange between two institutions, be prepared for incompatibilities. For example, a European school's prerequisites may not adequately prepare their students for the American course you're preparing for the two schools. Academic supports are just as vital for virtual classrooms as they are for regular institutions. 24/7 support may not be feasible, but again, providing accessible documentation and some form of live feedback through email, chat, or even Skype will help students focus on the content of their courses rather than logistical concerns. Finally, faculty preparation is key. Depending on their experience level, faculty may be ill-prepared for challenges they'll face in the global virtual classroom without some lessons about the complex context of cross-cultural online education. Now, some conclusions. To sum up, the opportunities for global virtual classrooms are growing. The markets for international education and for distance education are exploding, and the increasing access to technology makes the possibility of reaching out that much easier. However, while access and opportunity are growing, challenges still exist. Cultural and logistical barriers are not easily overcome without thorough planning and reorganization in order to better fit the needs of both distance students and of international students. Research has shown that when these needs are met, students find more engagement and more critical thinking than those without international collaboration. Finally, resources and research continue to grow. Tools like Second Life are now a bit old hat even. Virtual reality goggles, mobile applications, and more will continue to open up avenues of interaction for teachers and students to experiment with. Thank you for watching this presentation. I hope you found it enlightening, and I look forward to hearing your feedback.